Hey folks, it's Ron with the Aurora Chasers, back with another installment of our weekly Livestream Workshop Series. In this week's episode, we're going to teach you guys how to shoot some awesome reflection product shots, so let's dive into it. Hi guys, I'm Ron with the Aurora Chasers, and today we're going to teach you guys how to photograph reflection shots. And we're going to do that using a live multicam setup. MarkII is going to be helping today play director and producer, so she's behind the scenes working cameras and loading up our scenes and that kind of stuff. So she's going to be helping us on the backside. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm Ron with the Aurora Chasers, and today we're going to be covering how to take reflection shots at home. We're going to do this with a couple of different setups. We're going to show you different speed light options, and then at the end, if you stick around, we'll show you a budget option that you can do for a really affordable price. Some of this gear is kind of elaborate, some of it is very inexpensive, and you can do it either way. I'm going to show you a one light setup with a reflector, and then a two light setup, and then we'll talk about that budget option. So let's get into the gear that we're going to be using for today. The first couple of objects we have here, and by the way guys, I will link to all of the gear in the comment section at the end of the video when we're done. I'll go ahead and post a whole set of links for any of this gear, so if you're interested, you can pick that up. This is a white cutting board, a white glass cutting board that I picked off Amazon. I think it was less than 30 bucks for each of these. This is our first one, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We're going to start off with the black one, so I'm going to set this aside for now. And then this is my favorite to use. I like to use this for lots of different product shots if I'm doing commercial shots for somebody or anything like that. I tend to go with this black one most of the time. And you'll notice we have a black backdrop set up behind us to kind of cut any light and take any light away. So it's just going to be solid black with the beautiful reflections of what we're photographing. So that's the black one. And I'm going to just set that aside for the moment. And we'll talk about the rest of the gear we're going to be using. So I mentioned we're going to be using a 2 speed light setup at some point. We'll start off with one, and I'll show you what I use. I'm using the Evolv200s, and I really like these lights for multiple reasons. They're fairly inexpensive. They're one of the most budget-friendly speed lights that you can pick up. You have a couple of different options. I've got 2 of them sitting here, as you can see. They have multiple different heads that you can get them in with a kit, so you can use a regular flash unit, or you can use the bulb. So if you're going to stick that in a modifier, which we'll talk about in a minute, comes in really handy. They come with their own battery packs, which are rechargeable, last forever. And then the most important thing for me about these lights is that they do offer high-speed sync, which means that I can get away with going out in the bright daylight, and if I've got them very close to my subject, they have enough power that I can overpower the sun. So if I'm trying to do a photo of MarkII, for example, and I want the nice sky, the blue sky on a bright sunny day behind her to actually show up, I can use this at a 4,000th of a second, sometimes up to an 8,000th of a second, and it's going to pulse that light and still be bright enough to overpower that daylight. So really, really useful tools, especially for the price. And then, of course, they do come with a wireless trigger. I've got that set up on my camera, but I'll take that off for a minute and show you that. This one in particular is the Flashpoint R2 Pro Mark II. But there's several different versions of this that you can get. And again, that's a pretty budget-friendly option. That controls up to, I think, 16 speed lights. So I can have a group of lights, I can have just 16 lights at different power settings, and I can control all of that from right on deck on the camera. So it makes life much easier for me. Put that back on the camera. All right, so I'm going to set these aside for now. Let me talk about light modifiers and what I would use, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I have this little speed light to Bowens mount. So I have several light modifiers that are Bowens mount, and when I'm using this head, I'm going to insert this into the Bowens adapter, clamp it down. That's going to hang on to my speed light. Then I can mount that on a light stand, put my light modifier on, twist it, and it's going to stay locked in there. Makes life really easy for me because I do have some bigger lights that use the Bowens system, so I don't need a whole different set of modifiers for these lights. I can use just that Bowens mount. My favorite light modifier is the Westcott Rapid Box 24-inch beauty dish. Might be kind of hard to see. I'll back up just a bit here. This thing is just beautiful. It has a couple of different options. It's got the beauty dish reflector ring in there, which I can pop out. And as you can see, then I can just quickly set this up and use it as a normal kind of deep dish umbrella, which works really nice. I've got the diffusion panel that I can always throw over it. If I want the beauty dish without diffusion, I just slip that guy in there, pop it on, and we're good to go. And then I can always add diffusion. Now today, we are going to be using our diffusion because we want some nice soft fill light once we get into photographing our objects here. So let me get that all set up and ready. And I especially love this just because of the portability. This combined with those 200s, the flash units, makes life really quick and easy. I can set this up on the beach and do a photo shoot in about 2 minutes time. It doesn't take very long to get set up at all. Next thing we're going to talk about is if you don't have those options, but you do have a speed light, there's some other ways to deal with that. The one thing I would say is if you haven't already started, get used to using flash off camera. It's going to give you such a dramatically different look. In fact, I'll try to remember to demonstrate to you guys what it would look like if I had the flash directly on the camera. But by taking the flash off the camera, and you can use let's say you've got a Canon. You could use this Canon 600 RT or any of the Canon flashes. You mount this up in the one end of the cord, the other end goes into the hot shoe of your camera, and now you can move that flash unit around and get different angles on your light, which is going to make a dramatic difference in how your stuff is coming out. This one is the Canon version, which is honestly a little spendy, but you can get cheaper versions both on Adorama and Amazon, which will run you much less and do the same thing. You don't need the expensive brand names for those. It just needs to be eTTL. I forgot to mention, these flashes are TTL, or electronic TTL, meaning if you don't want to control manual settings on the flash units, not a big deal. You can actually set them up to read the light through the camera's lens. That's what TTL means, is through the lens, and it will sync up, and you can just set the power levels based on what the camera is actually metering. So the camera will meter and set the lights for you, and that all works through that Flashpoint system. Or if you had a proper Canon speed light on a Canon camera with one of these cords, it would work that way as well. And then, as promised, later we'll load up a little video. I had to shoot that in the dark because when we get into the budget-friendly options, you'll see why it needed to be dark. But this is a, right now, $30 light used on Adorama. It's just an LED panel that turns on, and you can light paint with this to do some of these product shots if you don't have all of this other equipment. So we'll show you how to do that at the end. Okay, let me get my staging area. One other thing that I'm going to be using is a couple of different sets of foam core board. I've got one in black and one in white. And the white one we're going to use both as a reflector at one point and as a backdrop at another point. This one we could use as a backdrop if you didn't have, say, this big cloth backdrop. So you could just set this up somewhere, maybe on a chair behind whatever you're photographing or however you want to set it up. This one in particular is nice because it does fold out. And so if I wanted to just set this up on the table behind my subject, I could do that just like that. I probably won't use this one. I just brought it out for demonstration to show you that if you didn't have a backdrop, you could use that. The white one we will use because we're going to use that as a reflector and as our white backdrop later. Okay, and then one other piece of gear that I'm going to be using today is just a really cheap Home Depot clamp. That's what I'm going to clamp that backdrop onto the table with. If you guys are doing any kind of photography projects at home and you don't already have a bunch of these, go pick up like 4 or 5. I think they're like $2 a piece. These things are super handy. Our whole backdrop is tacked up using these. I basically just always am grabbing a hold of these, so it's always good to have those around. And then finally, the rocket blower. If you don't have one of those, you absolutely should have one of those. Really handy for cleaning lenses if you're a Sony shooter like me. Really handy for blowing dust off your sensor. And today what we're going to do is use that to periodically maintain our glass cutting boards and make sure that we're keeping all the dust off of it. Because the more of that dust we can keep off of our cutting board, the less Photoshop work we're going to have to do. While I'm on that subject, let's talk about the editing of this. We're not going to cover that today. We will cover that next week. So we'll take some of the shots that we're doing today and then we'll edit them as our workshop for next week. So we'll show you guys that whole process. That's going to involve both Lightroom and Photoshop, some dodging and burning, some spot removal, some cropping, things like that. So you get to learn some tools that we haven't covered so far, and we'll delve into a few things in Photoshop, maybe some layer masks, things like that. So tune in next week for the editing portion of this. Okay. Before I get real deep into this, I want to start off by saying, if you guys purchase any of this gear through our links, we much appreciate it. It does help us. It gives us a small commission. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but I do want to talk about something a little more serious for a moment, so bear with me. I'm going to try to do this without tearing up. Last night, we learned that Alaska Camera, who has been our greatest supporter of our webcam and have become friends over the years, due to COVID-19 is closing their doors. And that camera store in Fairbanks has been around for 40 years. It was where I started my career. I grew as that store grew. It's had a huge impact on my life. A lot of the gear that we're using right now, the camera MarkII is filming me with at this moment, was purchased there. My very first tripod when I started photographing weddings, those of you who have been around a long time know I started off as a wedding and portrait photographer, then into commercial photography, and these guys have been there for me throughout my entire career for 13 years now. A lot of the gear that you would have rented from us if you've been on a tour with us came from them. Tom and Wendy took it over about 5 years ago, and they took that store from just a retail camera store to a place that had a community built around it. A place where anybody at any experience level could walk in and feel comfortable and feel like they were home. You didn't feel pressure to buy anything. People were always happy to answer your questions. You could go in and touch the gear and experience it and feel it and just know what it's like, and somebody would answer your questions about it. And they just treated you like family, and they became family, and we made a lot of friends as a result of that place. And they announced to us last night that they were closing the doors, and they're going to be open until the end of the month to liquidate everything. We're hopeful that they'll be able to come back in some capacity when this is all over. But they would like to try to get out of this as best they can without being in the hole, and so everything's going to be on sale. Starting today, they started their sales. So if you guys are in Fairbanks or even in Anchorage and you want to drive up to Fairbanks and support them, it would be awesome if you could do that. And we just want to give a heartfelt thanks to them for all the years of support. Okay, let's move on and get back into the workshop. Okay. So, let's start with a one light setup. So the first thing I'm going to do is put down my black cutting board, and I'm going to grab some glass cleaner and a paper towel, and we're going to wipe this up, make sure everything's good to go. MarkII has taught me a couple of little tricks about this, which make life a little easier. The first is don't spray the glass directly, or you'll end up with a bunch of streaks all over the place. So what we want to do is spray our paper towel, and then we're just going to give that a good wipe. And I try to just go back and forth with it. And that tends to take most of our dust spots and any streaks or anything like that. We do have some hard water spots on there, but not a big deal. We won't see those too much. Okay. Now, we're going to grab our first object. So I'm going to start off with a little seashell here. We're going to place that right about there, and then I'm going to come around to the other side. And before I do that, I'm going to grab my first speed light and a tripod, which we grabbed at Alaska Camera. And we're going to angle that light from here, shooting this way. So we're going to be about 45 degrees off the right side of the camera there. And what I've done with this particular light, these have 1/4 20 holes all over them. And so I've got a tripod shoe mounted to that. You can see this is one that lost its thing, so it's just permanently always mounted to the speed light. And it works with all our Manfrotto tripods, so it's really handy. I'll come around to the other side here, get all set up, and then we'll start shooting. Something like that. Now what I want to do is turn my flash on. I'm going to turn my remote on. And I know that this is channel A, and I've got channel A pulled up. You guys may not be able to see that, but channel A up here. And so I'm going to point this pretty much right at my shell at about a 45-degree angle off camera. Then I'm going to bring the camera in a bit closer, lower the angle a bit, and what I want to see is just that nice reflection there. 1/250th of a second, f11, and ISO is covered up, but I've got that at ISO 50. I want to go the lowest ISO I can so I have the cleanest image possible, and since I'm using speed lighting, I've got plenty of light to do that. So let's go ahead and take a shot, see how things are looking. Looking very nice. I might bring that brightness up just a touch. So right now my flash is set to 1/64th and a half, and I do set mine in 1/10 of a stop increments because I like to have fine control over it. We're going to bring that up to 1/32 even. And that's looking much better. I'm liking that a little better. One thing I don't like is, even though I'm off camera and I'm creating some shadows there, I'm going to angle this just a bit, bring it in a bit closer, and refocus. Let's try that. But I am getting a little specular highlights, and honestly there's not a lot of contrast to this. It's not popping off of the blackness the way I would like. So let's talk about another way to do that. We're going to use this same light on the back side of the object, and then we're going to bring in that white reflector to reflect some fill light back onto this. So we're going to take our kicker light now. So when you edge light something like this, we typically refer to that as a kicker. And what I'm going to do is just kind of eyeball that and aim that right at the back side, kind of at the top. And before I bring in my fill light, I just want to see how that's looking. So I'm going to take a shot and see if I'm getting that edge lighting that I want. A little bit. I'd like to see that a little brighter, so we're going to bring our flash power up 1 full stop. So right now we're at 1/32. I'm going to take that up to 1/16. Take another shot. And we could actually use maybe just a touch more. Let's try 1/8. That's looking good. Nice, bright edge light. Let me make sure I'm not blowing it out. No, I think that's perfect. Okay. Now we're going to come in with our reflector. And you don't need one this big for an object this size, but this is going to work for you if you have a larger object. So what I'm going to do is bring that in just out of frame, and we're going to take another shot. And you can see how that, just with that one speed light, now we have lit the front side and the back side of that just by bouncing that light off of the reflector onto our object. And that's just about perfect. If I wanted a little darker, I can move this back a little further. So if I wanted just a little less fill light, I'd maybe bring my reflector back a touch. And you see how that gets a little darker? For me, I like it a little bit more filled in. So we're just going to bring that right nice and close again, just out of frame, like so. Okay, let's talk about how to do that with 2 lights as opposed to using the reflector. So typically, because I have them, I will just use speed lights because I have a little bit more fine control over the finished product and how the light's hitting and how much light I have on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my second light, and that's the one with the glass tube on it and the Bowens mount, and then we're going to stick that nice diffusion panel, rapid softbox, onto our light here. And same thing. We're just going to bring that in about where we had that reflector. We don't need to get quite as close this time because we do have that latitude of being able to turn the flash power up and down. So we're going to turn that one on. And we've got that one on channel C at 1/28th of a power. We're going to bring that to about 1/64th and just see how that looks. And let's take a shot. Okay, so a little dark on our fill light. Let's go ahead and bring that up a stop. So we'll go 1/32nd, take a shot. Still a little dark. Let's go another stop. 1/16th. I might even go one more stop. Yeah, I like that. And now I'm feeling like that highlighted edge is maybe just a touch too much, so I'm going to bring that flash unit back down about a half a stop, and we'll see how that looks. Perfect. That's a nice looking shot. So that gives you guys an idea. You can see that nice reflection showing up there. Let me pull that back up. You can see how we've used just a couple of lights, and again, you can use a reflector, you can use two lights. If you have that one light, you can do so much with that and just a piece of white foam core. But let's go ahead and bring in another object. So my son always likes it when I photograph his Hot Wheels cars. That's one of his favorite things. And when you're using a macro lens, I should mention I am shooting these with the A7R III and the 90mm Sony macro lens. When you're using a macro lens, the cool thing is you can make a Hot Wheels car look like a real car. Let's line that up. Something like that. There we go. And let's just see how our lights look right now. Nice. I think the edge lighting is perfect. I think we could use some more fill. So we'll go back to channel C, which is our key light. We'll turn that up another, let's go half power, which is 2 full stops up from where we were. And let's see how we're looking there. Beautiful, beautiful. Might actually add, take another look at that. I think we're going to add a little bit of highlights in to that kicker. So let's bring that one up another stop. See how that looks. So 1/8 and a half. That's just a little too hot, so we'll go down half stop. Split the difference there. There we go. I'm liking that. And you can see how we're getting, again, that beautiful reflection just from this $30 cutting board from Amazon. All right, let's bring in a strawberry, which is always kind of a fun thing to photograph. A bit more. So ideally what we're going to get is some nice edging on the leaves there. And I want just enough that I'm seeing those reflections. Something like that. Off center that just slightly. And we can always crop this because everything's black behind it after the fact. So just giving ourselves plenty of room there. And let's go ahead and take a shot. Definitely need more fill. I really love the edge light there, but we don't quite have enough fill light. So we'll go back to our key light, and we're going to go full power on that. Let's see what we get. Very, very nice. I really like that. Let me show you guys. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off the light stand, and let me show you guys what we could do just hand holding this and putting it in different positions. Let me kind of get rid of some of our dust there. I'm seeing some dust spots. Okay. So we could come from the top here. We could come right in front of the camera. We could angle it back kind of more how we had it. And I think that's our best angle. So we're kind of 45 degrees to the right of the camera and 45 degrees above. So we're kind of angling down and from the right. And I really like the way that looks. Beautiful. Okay, so let me just show you guys, if I were to mount my flash directly on the camera itself, kind of what the difference would be. So I'm going to pop this one off the tripod. I'm going to turn it down because I know it's going to be way too bright at this setting. Go down to about a 30-second. And I'm going to mount or just hold this right above the lens as if I had it mounted to the camera itself. And you can see that's okay, but it doesn't really give us, you know, kind of any definition. There's not a lot of shadow. It just kind of starts to look a little flat. Now, if we did that same thing and maybe we had a kicker light, that might work for us. But I kind of like to always angle my light. I like to create shadows. So if you guys want, leave us in the comments a comment that you'd like to see a lighting workshop, and we can actually cover some of that stuff in more depth, talk about ratios and inverse square and all of that, and how to meter lights and set them up. We won't go quite into so much detail today, but just to give you guys some things to play with. Let's do a couple more shots, because MarkII set aside some cool fruit for us. I like to eat kiwis and strawberries. Those are some of my favorite fruits. And so MarkII picked those up both so that we could photograph them and so I could eat them later. So let's bring in a kiwi here. Now this is going to be a little trickier because we have two different subjects. One's going to be a little brighter than the other. So I'm probably going to end up bringing my key light in from the left side in this case, because I don't want to overexpose that kiwi. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. Let's turn our kicker back up. I think we were at 1/8 there. Let's see what we get there. Let's bring it right from the top, almost above the camera. That looks kind of nice. I like that. Okay, let's do white. Let's go to the whiteboard. Actually, before we do that, one more thing that might be kind of fun. We got a nice cooled off hard seltzer here, berry flavored. So let's get creative and just add that into the mix. So we're going to back the camera off a bit. We're going to rotate it sideways. Now, this is going to be a little tricky because we do have that white can and we've got some darker subjects, so we'll see if we can balance those things out here. Edge light is a little too strong now. So we're going to kick that down a couple stops, down to 1/32. And we're going to bring our fill in nice and close here. Something like that. If you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, we'll post it in the video itself, properly oriented. But you can kind of see what we're dealing with there. Okay, let's go ahead and get to our whiteboard now. We'll use that same strawberry on the white glass and show you how that looks. And same thing, we're just going to give this a nice wipe down, spraying the paper towel. And this is where we're going to use our white background so that we don't have all this funny black background behind us. So I'm just going to clamp this down here to the table. Like so. And then we're going to take the black out of here just so that that doesn't show up in our photo. Just like so. Put our strawberry back in the scene. Pretty ripe red side. Bring that leaf out just a touch. There we are. Now, I'm going to take this shot leaving the lights as they are just to show you guys what's going to happen, because I'm going to assume that with all the whiteness around now, it's going to blow out and we're going to have to adjust some settings. But let's go ahead and take a shot so that you guys can see the difference in how that's going to look versus once we've properly exposed things. And we'll bring our light stand back in just so we have that handy. And our key light. And we'll take a shot. And actually not too bad. I think we could actually turn our kicker up. So I'm going to bring that back up to 1/8. Looking very nice. And you don't need to worry about that edge in the background, because with some dodge and burn tools next week, you guys can kind of see that edge in the top of the frame there going across the frame. We'll take care of that with some dodge and burn. Not a big deal. If we wanted to eliminate that, we could always bring this a little bit closer. And you can see with all the white stuff around, this doesn't give quite as much of a reflection. But let me show you where we really do like this whiteboard. MarkII was doing some rainbow gummy bears, and she wanted to set up a scene that involved the sky. So she took this outside, and she set all her gummy bears up, and she shot with a wide-angle camera and got super close to her gummy bears and just used that like a lake for reflections. Something else I should mention, if you don't have a black or a white cutting board and maybe you don't know where to find them, or you don't want to purchase one and you do have a little chunk of mirror, you can absolutely use a mirror. Just keep in mind that a mirror is so much more reflective than these surfaces. The advantage to the black is that it does absorb any excess light and you're not going to see any reflections. If I were using a mirror, I'd have to be very careful about my camera angles and my background to make sure I didn't have anything unwanted showing up in the frame. Okay, and then as promised, guys, I did say we would give you guys a budget option. I did have to pre-shoot this last night because it required darkness, but MarkII is going to go ahead and load up a video for you, and we'll show you that, and then we'll be back. All right, guys, so let's say you're on a budget, you don't have speed lights, you still want to do these reflection shots, and maybe you're trying to use what you have available to you. So we're going to show you a trick to do that as promised. Here's what we would do. And in fact, I use this technique for video product shots all the time. I've got MarkII's Beats sitting here, and those make a really excellent model because they take light really well. And then what I'm using is just a little Clar LED light panel. So you can see in this panel, we've got a series of LEDs, and I've got a set of barn doors on it that came with the light. And I'm just going to keep those nice and closed so I can kind of focus the light only where I want it to be. So what we're going to do is just light this just like we did before with the speed lights, but using this light. So I will start off on the front, and I will paint the light across here for my fill light just kind of slowly. And then I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to give it that kicker light that we set up with that single strobe shooting back, so it gives it a nice highlighted edge at the top. So I'll do that with the lights on first to demonstrate so you guys can see how it works. Then I'll turn the lights off and I'll actually make the shot, and I'll show you what that shot looks like. So what we want to do is just start off, and imagine this is our fill light. The advantage to this is we can move the light as we're shooting. So I can start here, and I want to kind of come over here to this edge, and then I'm going to run around the back side, holding the light against my body so that it's not spilling anywhere. And then I'm going to just hold it there for a little while to really put that highlighted edge, and then close down again, kind of hide it again. So filling here, and I don't want to be behind it, which is why I'm going to be in front, because if I'm behind it, you'll see me in that shot. So I'll start off in the front, we'll light it like this. I'll run around to the back here, holding it covered, and then we'll just put a nice highlighted edge on the top, and then our shot will be done. So as you see, with all the lights off, can't really see anything, and that's okay, we're going to solve that. But when I paint that, what I'm doing is I just really want to see all the edges, and you can see how for a video shot that makes a nice look too. And then I'm going to run around the back side, and again, just put that nice highlighted edge on the back side, just like so. All right, so I've got my ISO set to 50. I'm going to give myself a 2-second self timer here just so that I have a little extra time to hit the shutter and settle down any vibrations like I would for normal night light painting. And then we're going to hit the shutter, wait a couple of seconds for it to trigger the shutter. I'm going to come around the front side with the light and then the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my light on, get that ready to go. All right. Hold that against my belly just to kind of help keep the light from spilling everywhere. Hit my shutter. And then I'm just going to come around the front side just like so with the light. And then I'm going to sneak around the back side here and give it that nice rim light. Just hold that. And there you go. And so that's what you can do with using just a LED light. You could use your phone light for this. You could even use a flashlight, just cover it up, kind of paint it over. Any kind of light source is going to work. You just want to worry about the white balance. Make sure you got the white balance correct. And for your camera, in this case, I'm using a daylight white balance light, so not a big deal. But if you're using an iPhone light, they tend to be a little on the blue side. So just check your white balance in your camera on a couple of shots. If you're shooting RAW, of course, you can always tweak that. But that's how to do this on a budget. As mentioned in that video, this is that little light. I found them on Adorama in great condition, used for about 30 bucks. And again, if you're watching this on the live stream right now, I will link these items in the comments after the fact. If you're watching this later on YouTube, we'll have them in the description so you can check those out. One thing I want to talk about, again, just going back to Alaska Camera or any local camera store, if you guys can support your local camera stores, please do so. And if you happen to be in Fairbanks or in Alaska, I know Alaska Camera had quite a bit of cool lighting last time I was in there, so you might stop in there. You might get a smoking deal on something right now. So pop in there and check them out. I just wanted to plug a couple of our things, of course. If you guys would like your very own Aurora Chasers t-shirts, I did redesign them just slightly, made the logo just a little bit smaller, so if you order them now, they'll be just a bit smaller logo, but you can have a shirt just like this at our merch store. That is www.theaurorachasers.com/merch. And then, of course, all of our social media links. We would love if you guys would follow us on YouTube. We have started to produce some content there that doesn't necessarily make it here on Facebook. So if you guys are interested in more of this kind of stuff, more behind the scenes tutorials, reviews about gear, that kind of stuff, check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/theaurorachasers. Of course, we're on Twitter, Instagram, all those other places. And the best place to follow us for everything that we do is going to be through theaurorachasers.com. We really appreciate your guys' support. Talking about the camera store, that hit hard for a lot of reasons, partially because we're feeling those same impacts. So you guys have been amazing. You guys have ordered prints, you've ordered t-shirts, some of you guys have bought the gift cards for the tours, and that is honestly what is keeping us going right now. So we greatly appreciate that. Thank you guys so much. We would not be able to continue on as a business if you guys weren't here supporting us. So if you've already done that, thank you so much. If you have the means and you'd like a print or a t-shirt, or you'd like to get on a tour, go get one of those gift cards at 25% off. Guys, really sincerely, this is what's keeping us going, and we really appreciate you folks. We would not be able to sustain ourselves if you guys weren't helping support this. So we'll keep bringing these workshops every week. And then more of the in-depth content. We're going to be bringing out the MyOps Splash water drop kit. We just filmed a 3-day shoot covering how to use that and doing a review on it. So that'll go up on YouTube either later this week or early next week. So check that out over there. Next week, we will cover the editing from the photos from today. So we'll take those from Lightroom, we'll do some pre-edits on them, and then we'll take them into Photoshop and do the final work on them. And then the week after that, we'll cover some lighting stuff. We thank you guys again for all the support and for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, guys. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Leave us a comment below if you found this useful. Let us know what you're going to try out with these reflection shots. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.